All right, let's go to the Louisiana area. And this is Rob. What's up, Rob?
Yeah. Hey, Bart. How's it going?
Good.
Hey, yeah. So I got my start as a rec player in Shreveport a couple of years ago, mostly playing 1-3 around the area there.
Hmm.
And it struck me, and you called it out too. I heard you talking earlier about how you never see in the high stakes games, especially the televised ones, you never see them tipping the dealer. So I was wondering, sort of like what your take is, if there's an industry standard for tipping your cash game dealer, and if there's a certain amount or a certain rule about how you should be going about that.
Okay, so let's start off with your first question about you don't see high stakes players tipping the dealers, especially on televised shows. Okay, that does not mean that the dealers aren't getting tipped. So usually when you're playing in a high stakes game, like on a Friday game on Live at the Bike, and I've played in that game a few times, or any other televised game I've played on Poker Night in America, you will be paying a time collection. I don't remember if on Poker Night in America we actually didn't have to pay the casino time. I don't think we did, but on Live at the Bike you have to pay the bike time. And then every person will also pay extra for gratuity for the dealer. So let's say, for example, at Live at the Bike, it's, I don't know, whatever, 50 and a half hour to play 100, 200, or 50, 100. Everybody will also put in like another, say, $20 or something like that per player for the half or for the hour. And that will be the gratuity for the dealers. Sometimes you'll see it like, it'll be like a tip pot or a collection pot where the winner of the pot will actually pay the collection for everybody and will also pay the gratuity. But when you're watching high stakes poker games, they're not tipping the dealer. It's just already worked in to the gratuity ahead of time. Now, sometimes you'll see people put in extra, but that's why you don't see it. And it's really to speed up the game. And also, too, like in 75 150 Omaha at the World Series, back when the collection was, I think it was 7 or 8.5 or something like that. It would be quicker to do a collection pot because you wouldn't have to, because we're dealing in $25 chips and you have to go around for like the $1 chips and stuff like that and break the pot up. So that's number one. Now, in terms of like you yourself, you have to ask yourself as a, am I a for-profit player? Am I a recreational player? If you're a recreational player, you can do whatever you want, right? If you're a for-profit player, what I would say is that you definitely have to watch the amount that you tip. And in LA, especially, where I cut my teeth, which is a flat drop, if you can imagine the amount of collection that I was paying to the casino, especially if I was playing somewhat of a laggy style at straight 510 with a flat drop, meaning they take the entire amount after the flop. It's not a rake. Let's say I was playing 6 or 7 handed and I won 5 or 6 pots an hour. I'm paying $35 an hour right then and there. Now, if I'm tipping on top of that $5 per hand, you can see that starts to add up, right? I'm going to say, do with the caveat that you can do whatever you want. But what I would try to do in LA is if the pot was like less than $50, I would actually rarely tip at all if it was less than $50. Once the pot would have to get up to something past like a flop and a call. Sometimes I would, but you know what I'm saying? Like sometimes I would, but it would
Right.
just be a way to sort of mitigate things. Now, once the pot got really, really big, like say it might have gotten over like $500 or something like that, maybe I would tip a few dollars, maybe I would tip $5. And then if the pot was just super, super big, I might tip like $10. I don't know what the biggest tip, maybe like I tipped $25 like in a $15,000 pot once or something, like the biggest pot in the history of 510. But the point really is, especially if you're playing in a collection-based game, then a raked-based game, it will eat you alive if you win a lot of pots and you tip on all the small pots and you're tipping a few dollars on all the small pots. And, I am one of the biggest tippers, really, when it comes, like when I go out to restaurants, like I used to bartend and I tip a ton on service type things, right? The thing that would
Right.
get me is when they would bring over free food, and the Euros would do this, by the way, the Euros, because I don't think they have tipping in their culture, right? They would bring over free food at Commerce, right? Somebody would order, like, you used to be able to order whatever you wanted. So somebody would order like a platter of food. And I saw some guys tip like the waitress, who really is only working for minimum wage and tips. They would tip the waitress $1 for the free food. $1. Whenever I ordered food, especially if it was free, I would tip at least $5. $5 was standard, right? But,
Right.
for the most part. But like I said, you get sometimes you get sort of weird looks from the dealers because they don't think that you tip enough. I mean, the logical argument is that what difference does it make how big the pot is? You should tip the same amount every time, right? Well, unfortunately, we live in reality. What difference does it make if I go to French Laundry in Napa Valley and I ordered a $500 bottle of wine, or I went to Joel Robuchon in Las Vegas, or MGM Atelier or the Mansion, which I did a few summers ago, and the check is $2,500? Why am I not tipping the same amount on $2,500 as I'm tipping like a breakfast diner, right? Why is it a percentage? Those might not be great examples because the level of service at some of those Michelin 3-star places are great, but just an expensive restaurant. How about an expensive Las Vegas club restaurant that's fucking just shitty? Like at Cosmo or the Aria or whatever, where the service is just garbage and the food is overpriced. Why am I tipping them more because it's a percentage of the check than I'm tipping somebody when I go out for breakfast, right? It's just sort of the reality of the situation. So yes, you sort of have to mitigate it, but you do have to sort of keep it under control. And I'm just telling you, I did not tip that much on very, very small pots. Do you have a specific thing that you were wondering about too in this?
Yeah, there was one hand in particular. I ended up, I hit the nut flush on the turn and dragged like a $1,500 pot, which playing 1-3 was pretty good. So I ended up tipping the guy like $15, which he was happy to get. And then the table just stared at me like, "You tipped him more than $2? Are you insane?"
You won how much? 1,500?
1,500. So I tipped it $15, which is like 1% of the pot I won.
At a 1-3 game? At a 1-3 game?
At a 1-3 game.
I mean, honestly, like I don't think that that's really all that unreasonable. It might be on the high side, but I mean, I've seen people just throw money at dealers. Well, you can't start tipping like $5-10 every single hand. And by the way, this is a technique that they do in home games too. I was never big in the home game scene, but not only are they raking the fuck out of home games, at least in California from what I saw, they wouldn't even give out $1 tokes. And the dealers would make so much money from like tips, like people, like money being thrown at them. They would only get like 20% of it at the end of the night. Like these proprietors weren't letting dealers like walk away with $3,000 for dealing like that night, right? So that was like another way for like home games to bring in money, was sort of like the tipping and the tax or the commission by the house, like on the tipping. But if I was playing a 1-3 game and I won a $1,500 pot, that might be like the equivalent of me winning like a $5,000 pot at 5-10. Maybe I wouldn't have tipped $15, but maybe I would have tipped like $10. Usually I see the weird looks from the other way where people are like, "You didn't tip enough," right? You didn't tip enough. Now, maybe some people are more sort of miserable kind of at the lower stakes. And are you playing in a rake structured game where there's money taken out of the pot each time?
Yeah, it was a rake. So I think it was a $5 rake. This was up at Maryland Live.
So it's $5 rake. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Do you tip every single hand that you play?
No, typically just the big pots. I think my rule of thumb is typically if it goes over 100, then I might tip a couple bucks, but not too high.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I think that you got to keep the small pots under control, because, you can debate whether you're going to tip 10 or $15 for a 500 big blind pot. But how often are those 500 big blind pots happening? Not very often, right? But how often are the pots happening that are like 30 or $40 at 1-3? If you're starting to tip on every single pot that just goes bet fold, and you're starting to tip more than $1 on certain pots that are less than 100, you will see that shit will add up. Some people here actually are saying in the live chat, which is interesting, that the tip on the bad beat jackpot. See, I think the bad beat jackpot, it is what it is. It could be good for the game in the sense that if the right types of players are playing in the game for the bad beat jackpot, the tax on the game, you could make the argument could be worth it. Bad beat jackpot, I mean, it was just a joke at Commerce 510, because unless they were doing a super jackpot, the bad beat jackpot would be like 18,000. So the loser of the bad beat hand, I don't know, would get like 9 or 10,000, however it was chopped up. The winner would get like, the winner of the hand would get 3 or 4. And then the table share amongst like the other 7 people was like 20 or 25% divided by 7. What's 20% of 20,000 is what? 4,000 divided by 7 people. It's like less than $600. I'm not saying that it's nothing, but we're playing 5-10. Sometimes the loser of the hand would lose more money in the hand than the bad beat jackpot would actually pay out. And when you did the math on that, the amount of money that they took for the bad beat jackpot was such a scam, especially at 5-10, because 5-10 they would pool the jackpot together with the smaller games, and the smaller games would have more all-ins. So you'd see more showdowns, right? All-ins pre-flop, running out 5 cards. They would pool them sometimes with the limit games. We would disproportionately get way, way less back. Plus whatever the 60%, administration fee that they got to take on the bad beat jackpots. But people were talking about tipping for bad beat jackpots. Yeah, I mean, if I got a bad beat jackpot, I would tip some to the dealer. But I mean, if it was say 10,000, I don't even remember. I think I got $5,000 table share once. One time they were doing promotions at Commerce where it was 150,000 super jackpot. It didn't last long. This might've been 10 or 15 years ago. And I was at the table when one of them hit. One guy had pocket aces, one guy had pocket tens, and the flop came out ace 10-10. And that was it. And you had to do it during a certain time. And it was a special qualification. It wasn't just aces full of tens. The most common way that a bad beat jackpot is hit in California is that the board comes out with 3 aces on it. Somebody's got a pocket pair above tens, and then someone has an ace with a kicker that plays, right? But that's not a super jackpot. A super jackpot there, you had to have pocket pair over pocket pair. But the aces against the tens qualified. The guy just won it right on the flop. He won 90,000, right? And I got a 5K table share, because it was like 7 divided by 30 or whatever it was, 6 divided by 30. And, I think I tipped the dealer like $100. But again, it's not like you're winning free money when you get some of the bad beat jackpot. You've paid that. I was way, way down. I never got a top or a middle end of the bad beat jackpot ever. I got some table shares. And then, of course, like the floor will expect you to tip them. I mean, that's the other thing, too. If you could grease the floor to actually get you in the right games. I mean, there was, hey, listen, it's capitalism. I'm not saying it's necessarily right, but there was times at Commerce where I knew I could tip guys and they would sometimes like jump other unknown players in like sort of the list to change tables. You know what I mean? Shit like that, or kind of just get you in the game without waiting. I mean, that can be effective.
Right. So that's where I guess it becomes more art than science, right? Like instead of tipping a certain amount just because of the pot, like what is your objective with the tip? Are you doing it because you're getting good service, or are you trying to accomplish something?
Well, they do work for, I mean, it's the same thing though. I mean, you're going to tip at a restaurant. Anybody can tell me that, oh, I don't tip at a restaurant pretty much as an asshole, right?
Right.
For the most part, right? I mean, it's just sort of, you have to, it comes with the fact that you're a human being. And you know that these people are working for minimum wage and they make most of their money on tips. I mean, you would have to be a really like almost like a sociopath to walk into a restaurant with the intention of saying, I'm going to have a meal and I'm just not going to tip because I don't believe in it. You know what I'm saying? And I tried to explain that to some European guys too, because they're like, we don't have tipping in our culture. I'm not going to tip at a restaurant. And I'm like, yeah, but you don't, your service people get paid like a livable wage though. This is how it works here. Can't you adjust to the culture that you're in? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's like,
well, I mean, I did some time in Germany, and like if I tried to tip more than like, 2 or 3 euros, I'd get blasted for the same reason. Are you saying that we're too poor to pay our own people?
Well, sometimes, yeah, when I lived in England, like it would be, you get a weird look if you tip the bartender. You'd be like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? So that's not part of the culture. Yeah. I would just say, like I said, keep the tipping in check for small pots if you're playing for profit. I wouldn't be overly concerned about over tipping for a lot like gigantic pots because they just don't happen that much. It's the more common scenarios that you want to, pay attention to, right?
Right.
So anyways, thanks for the call. I appreciate it. If you like what you've seen here, please hit the subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this call in hand, hit the like button down below. To check out crushlivepoker.com, click on the link in the description. Use the code YTA300 to get the first 30 days for free.